Hey everybody, this is Kurt. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the new Black Templars. There's this article posted on Warhammer Community today, just talking about some of the new design philosophies, or even just some of the thoughts that went into the different design choices for the new models. And you have no way of knowing this, of course, but I'm really into the Black Templars. I've never collected an army, and I was about to. And then I heard a rumor some months ago that there was going to be a major rework to the Black Templars. So I just kind of sat on my hands and waited. And now that it's out, that's the next project I'm going to tackle after I finish my Maggotkin army. But looking at some of this article, it looks like the designer was, this is a French name, and I'm going to butcher it, Maxime Corbeil. So she, doesn't say, it looks like, designed some of these new models. So first, they take a look at High Marshal Helbrecht, and High Marshal Helbrecht, he is the chapter master of the Black Templars. Taking a look at this model, he's got this sword that's penetrating the chest of this orc. I think that's an homage to the Battle of Armageddon, perhaps. Maybe a different battle, but at Battle of Armageddon he took on some serious orcs and won, I believe. I'm not super strong on 40k lore, but just looking at this model, just my personal reaction, okay, my first thoughts when I see this model, it brings me right back to some of the early Warhammer art, especially surrounding this faction, some of the John Blanche pieces that really just, I don't know, whenever I see them, it really captures my imagination. Looking at it, they've really done a great job of staying true to that influence. It looks very gothic, it looks very dark. And he's a hero, but also seeing some of the accoutrement on this model, for example, the skull, which apparently is the skull of the navigator that brought his fleet to Armageddon. You see the skull, you see the German cross, the Iron Cross here. You see his face. Everything about this is just pure grimdark. It's so Warhammer. And this here, folks, is the image that I'm talking about. This is a piece by John Blanche. This is from an older codex. But if you just take a look at what we see here, this is not High Marshal Helbrecht. But you can see what he's wearing on his head looks very similar. Some of that Crusader's crown. And see the skulls mounted on their backpacks and their banners. And you see the Iron Cross on all their armor. You see the tabards that they have on top of their power armor. This is just, in my mind, when I think Warhammer, this is the sort of picture that comes to mind. When I think grimdark, this is what comes to mind. In fact, this is so much of why I love Warhammer. It's such a strange science fiction universe that on the one hand is science fiction, but on the other hand feels very dark fantasy. Space elves, and there used to be space dwarves, and then you had these space crusaders, and just such a space orcs. It's just such an interesting universe, and seeing it portrayed this way by the inimitable John Blanche, it just is. There's just so much about this, not just nostalgia. There's something else to it. I've never seen any of the modern artwork quite capture the essence of Warhammer like you see John Blanche. And I know I'm not alone. I know this is not a unique thought to have. So many Warhammer fans are also fans of John Blanche's work because that's what got a lot of us into the hobby in the first place. But I am just a slobbering fanboy when it comes to John Blanche's work, especially over the Black Templars. So anyway, back to the main article. We see a lot of these influences here. It's a beautiful model. I like to compare it to the older model here. This is the classic High Marshal model. Now looking at this model, and looking at this model, excuse me, you can definitely tell that they're the same character. From their facial expressions to the sword, holding that lantern thing. Even see the Melta. Excuse me. You see the iconography. You see the skull on his power pack. You look at all of this. You can tell that they're the same character. However, everything about this older model has just been dialed up to 11. And look at this Crusader helm they've got. Oh my goodness. That is a beautiful, beautiful helmet. I'm really just a huge fan of what they did with the new sculpts. I also wanted to talk a little bit, read some of the text that Maxime, some of the words that he said in this interview about these sculpts. So I'll read directly from here. The miniature was designed to represent his status, opulence, and power as a chapter master of the Black Templars. It really plays on the archetype of king. Helbrecht's model is covered in subtle details that tell his story, such as his bionic right hand, a replacement for the one he lost at the hand of Imhotep the Stormlord. So right here it says bionic hand. There are other nuances too, as Maxime continues. We made the sword of the High Marshals really big, as it contains elements of Rogel Dorn's own blade. Rogel Dorn was the chapter master of the the Primarch of the Imperial Fists, made from the Emperor's own gene seed. So he's sort of the progenitor of not sort of, he is the progenitor of the Black Templars. They're sons of Dorn. So they're in direct relation to the Imperial Fists. And as I'll talk about in a moment, that relationship is represented in the model. Here we go. The spikes on its hilt represent both duty and failure. It speaks of penance and the responsibility that Helbrecht has to uphold the honor of the chapter and the legacy of Sigismund. So, if you're not sure of the lore of the Warhammer 40k universe, the Emperor was attacked by Horus, one of his sons, another Primarch. And the Horus heresy is that you can't summarize it in 5 minutes, but essentially, Rogel Dorn's role in this, the Imperial Fists were there to guard Terra, guard Earth, from the forces of the traitor Astartes. And they failed in that measure because the Emperor was slain. And so as a result of that, the Imperial Fists took on such a heavy oath of penance, and even more so the Black Templar. They represent sort of that penitential aspect of the Imperial Fists and the honor as well. So those themes are extracted and just dialed up to 11. We took the opportunity to give him a Crusader-style helmet option and designed his armor to echo the Mark II pattern as a nod to the traditionalist mindset of the Black Templars. Even though Helbrecht has crossed the Rubicon Primaris, he's held onto the same armor and had it reforged. Black Templars don't like change. That's a nice touch. That was something that, as soon as they re-released the Black Templar line, I remember seeing the release video. The thing that struck me the most was that even though these are all the Primarisized Marines, that if you weren't paying attention, or maybe new to the game, you would assume that these are the old school Space Marines. Because they've stuck to the same armor design principles. Obviously, they have updated them in small ways, but when you look at these models, you look at the power armor, you look at their weapons, you would be hard-pressed to find significant differences. And I think that's really great. It's not just an homage. It's really true to the lore of the Black Templars that, like Maxime said, they don't like change, and they hold on to the same principles over and over and over again. In fact, so much so that they still organize themselves in the crusade structure instead of according to Guilliman's Codex Astartes, which orders and limits the size of Space Marine chapters. They maintain a much, much larger force because they're in a crusade structure, and and at least I haven't read the new lore, but up until this point, they largely ignored the Codex Astartes. They have their own characteristics. So, all right, so that's the classic model again. It was a great model. I mean, it's an old model, but it just tells a story, and I think that's why I like these new sculpts too, because they stayed true to that and just dialed it up to 11. And that's, man, isn't that 40K? 40K is just science fiction. Every science fiction trope you can find throw it into a basket, dial it up to 11. And it's so exaggerated. It's humorous, and it intends to be tongue-in-cheek. It intends to be funny. But for some reason, instead of being annoying or trite, it's charming. And I see that really played out here. The Space Orcs are a great example of that. The intentionality behind the humor that they bring to the game, but yet the menace and the threat that they represent not being understated. It's really well designed lore and universe. Yep, here's the detail about the skull. They say, we imagine it to be the skull of the navigator who first led him to Armageddon, says Maxime. He keeps it with him now in the hopes that it will eventually guide him to Goskull Thraka, so he may avenge those who fell. Goskull Thraka is the head of an Orc-Wa. It reminds me a lot of Grimgor Ironhide, sort of the Warhammer 40k version of the Black Orc. I think that was what he went by. Anyway, now here's High Chaplain Grimaldus. I wonder if they show they don't really show the old models of Grimaldus and retinue. But if you see this is just incredible. This was better than I could have ever hoped for. I know when I heard the rumors that they were remaking the Black Templars, I knew it would be good because they have really solid miniature design, and I knew it wasn't going to disappoint. But this exceeds any expectation that I had. I'm a huge fan of this sort of Crusader imagery. Really like I would say pseudo religiosity of the Imperium, but with the Black Templars, there's no pseudo there. They're very much playing up on these themes, the Knight Templar and the Crusade orders of the Middle Ages. They're playing up on this, so it's all intentional. But they really brought things out that I would have never even thought of, like having these Cenobite servitors that are attached to him. It's part of his unit stats is that he has this retinue that follows him, and I've read through some of this stuff, and apparently that is the skeleton of a psyker that they killed. And so a lot of chapters, especially Space Marine chapters, if they bring a skeleton with them on a pike like this, the whole idea is that it's to honor their dead, their fallen, but not the Black Templar. When they have a skeleton on their banner, it serves as sort of like, this is what we're going to do to you. and they've captured that here. And also with the candles, what a great touch, and the scrolls, the purity seals, and these lantern things on the end. Look at what's on the image on the banner. Incredible work. And each one of these Cenobite servitors tells a story too. Like you see, this one is burning incense, and you see this one has like some sort of a holy water backpack with like this bowl, and is that the Thurifer? I'm not sure what the proper name for this is. I forget. But and then over here you have this guy who's, if I remember correctly, he's carrying on his back a pillar from the fallen temple it looks like Hell's Reach. The third Cenobite carries a chunk of the temple of the Emperor Ascendant from the ruins of Hell's Reach Hive on Armageddon. So, talking about telling a story, I mean, a psyker that they killed is now hung upon the banner. This guy with some crazy holy water contraption, and then this guy with a pillar on his back, that's from the temple of the Emperor Ascendant from Hell's Reach. That's just incredible. And something else, of course, I'm a Christian myself, and so I do find it very interesting seeing, because looking at the lore of 40k, it's very clear that you're meant to draw a comparison between medieval Christianity and the Imperium, and the homage to a lot of this religious imagery is not lost on me, especially this servitor carrying this piece of the temple, an aspect, not just, I would say it's definitely present in Crusade culture, especially from that time period, but even still in Christianity throughout various ages. Some of the people held up as saints, they would put themselves through rigors, through not tests, but through ways of maybe as penance for great evil that they've committed, or as an act of devotion, they would carry a cross on their own back to sort of share in the suffering of Jesus. And so when you look at this image here too, they really did some solid research on what a crusade army would look like, and he is representing that. Instead of a cross, he has this piece of the statue of the Emperor ascended from the temple there. Really incredible stuff. And look at this detail on Grimaldus on his power pack. He's got that the sort of the scrimshaw hand and a broken blade, and he's got this chain attaching his plasma pistol to his armor, and same thing with his Crozius. It's just such an incredible job. This, in my opinion, is even better than the High Marshal model. This is just truly a work of art. Something I would expect to see on like there's the Facebook group, Inc. 28. I think it's the old Inquisitor game, sort of a super grimdark Blanchian style. This is something that I would expect to see on that page, not necessarily even on the Warhammer Community website. So very, very exciting stuff. And then finally, the Emperor's Champion. Again, what a great homage to a classic piece. They updated it. It's clear that it's updated, but again, in some ways, if you didn't know any better, you might look at this and say, wow, I wonder how old that model is. And do they have a comparison here? They don't. I mean, they want to draw your attention to Sigismund, the first Emperor's Champion from the Imperial Fists. The laurels there are an homage to that. But something they say about the story of this model is you compare him to Grimaldus. Okay, immediately you're going to notice he's very plain in comparison. So the reason for that is the Emperor comes upon him, essentially chooses him to be his champion, and when that happens, he sort of sheds any defining characteristic of himself to make himself essentially irrelevant. When people see him, they should just see sort of a glorification of the power of the Emperor of mankind. And so he's taken off anything that reminds anybody of who he once was, any heraldry, any images, any scrimshaw, any idols that he carried, and now all he is the Emperor's servant. A martyr, really, ready to go into battle to die for the cause. So great artwork here. This model, again, it's not, in my mind, not as impressive as what was done with the Grimaldus and retinue, but still very much a faithful update to the line. So if you're looking for my reaction to some of the new designs, some of the new sculpts, some of the new ideas behind the Black Templars, just consider me thrilled. This is exactly the kind of thing that I would hope to see of all of their range refreshes. They don't just bring it up to date in terms of size and scale with the bases and the models, but they take what people love about the thing, they take what's beautiful about the thing, and just crank up the notch and really exaggerate these features. And that they say that might be fan service, right? That might be sort of pandering to the fans, but pander away, man. If this is what we're dealing with, I'd be pandered to all day. So with that, I will leave you for today. Thanks for tuning in. If you liked what you saw, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel. It means an awful lot. Really helps me out growing this channel, growing our community. Please leave a comment if you disagree or if I said something wrong, which is honestly likely. The lower side of Warhammer is new to me, but I've been playing the game for about 6 years now, and it's the greatest game I've ever played. So on this channel, we also talk about other games, but predominantly we do PC games and Warhammer 40k and Age of Sigmar. So, like I said, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next video.